Our next speaker is Dr. Nele De Witte, De Witte, sorry. She's, I don't know if it is De Witte or De Witte. She's a senior researcher at the Expertise Unit Psychology in the Technology and Society of Thomas More University of Applied Science. And she's also the scientific coordinator at Laika Lab, where she focuses on research methodology and study design of living lab research. And she's studying also how technological applications and virtual reality and insight into psychophysiological processes can improve prevention and treatment of mental disorders. Today, she's going to present the work they are doing with Dr. Tom Van Dale and his group about a mobile application for the treatment of animal phobia. Thank you very much, Neil, and you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind words and inviting me. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. So, indeed, today I would like to talk to you about how we can use a smartphone device to augment exposure therapy. And actually, Soledad has already saved me a lot of time because she's explained exposure therapy perfectly for me. So indeed, it is very effective. There are still many challenges relating to availability of animals, working with the animals, and also recurrence outside of the treatment context, as Soledad explained. But new technologies definitely provide opportunities to improve exposure therapy. And these new technologies can be virtual reality. There's a lot of research on that, and it really appears to be very effective. But it can also be augmented reality. So similarly to Soledad, I will talk about augmented reality exposure therapy. So a sort of add-on or type of exposure therapy in which clients can interact with a virtual representation of an object or situation in the actual world to help them reduce fear or avoidance. But the largest difference between our two studies is the device that we're using. So what we use in our research is the Phobos AR app, which is an application that runs on iOS devices, Apple devices, and that allows you to present many different animals in a very controlled way through augmented reality. So you can select which animal, how you view it, whether it's more like a schematic version of the animal or a real life animal, whether it is moving in case of a dog, whether it is making any noises, and so on. So it's a very innovative application that was developed by Fernando Tarragol, who's an Argentinian psychologist. And it's actually the first or one of the first applications that really provides you with access to the whole range of animals, and it is also commercially available already. So there are indeed, as Soledad also explained, many advantages of using AR. And I think a couple of them are really interesting. First, we can do a more gradual approach. We see that exposure therapy currently mainly exists of either imaginary exposure, so using your thoughts or pictures to expose somebody to the animal that they're frightened of, or in vivo exposure, where you really use the actual animal in your therapist's office. But introducing a step in between with AR, but it can also be VR, can give you a more gradual approach, a gradual increase in fear. AR applications also give you increased control. It's very easy to have the animals perform the exact behavior that a person is frightened of. If a person is afraid of dogs barking or jumping, you can have this dog do that under your control. Thirdly, indeed, as Soledad said, therapist contacts. We maintain a real context. We can see the people around us. So it gives you more interaction as opposed to a headset that can sometimes close you off a little bit from the real world. An advantage of using a smartphone is also that we can give homework exercises to our clients. We can now say, well, here's a smartphone, you can take it to your house and you can have a look at spiders maybe in your basements, in your bathroom, in your garden, or in any place where this person might experience this fear normally. So we can do extinction in multiple contexts which can help us prevent recurrence, which can make our extinction effect stronger. Other advantages are that a smartphone is a device that a lot of people have access to. Unfortunately, currently the app is only for Apple devices. We're hoping that an Android version will be available soon. But it's a very common device that a lot of people already have. And it can therefore be a very low cost option for both the therapist and the patient. The application itself is currently, I think, about $2. So it's really not expensive, which is also a big advantage. However, and we also discussed this today already a little bit, there's not a lot of research on the effect of AR exposure therapy thus far. And I think pretty much all the research that has been done by you guys in Spain. There's been a lot of research on AR there, but otherwise, and on new applications, there's really not that much. So we wanted to see whether the augmented reality exposure application, the smartphone application that we use, whether it can actually work. And the first thing that we wanted to assess whether it would activate the fear system, because emotional processing theory states that if we want exposure therapy to be effective, the animal must be able to activate our fear system. So we wanted to assess whether these virtual animals are indeed inducing fear in participants. And we did 2 experiments to test this, and the results have also been published in Frontiers in Virtual Reality. And in the first experiment, we included 108 students, and we asked them to select one of the animals that are available from the app that evoked mild discomfort. We didn't want to include really anxious people at this point yet, because it's first an experiment and we wanted to test it in a population where we can do little harm, of course. So they selected an animal that evoked some discomfort, and in the graph below you can see which animals they selected. We see that in Belgium there's a lot of people who are afraid of spiders, but we also saw some snakes, some cockroaches, mice, and so on. We then had them do a behavioral approach task, which means that they went through several steps of increasing difficulty of being close to the animal. So they would start with the animal at a distance, it would come closer, they would walk towards you, the spider can be on your hand even, and so on. So the difficulty levels increased, and we asked them to report subjective units of distress, so how uncomfortable they were at that point. We also collected heart rates to see whether physiologically there was also some activation there. And in this experiment, we also included both an iPhone and an iPad to see whether the size of the screen would also make a difference in how they experienced this virtual animal. And these were the results of the first experiment. As you can see, we've got 3 cycles of increasing difficulty. And we saw that indeed all the participants definitely increased. They felt more uncomfortable as the difficulty level went up. We did see an effect of experienced realism. We used the iGroup presence questionnaire to measure how realistically they felt that the animal was for them. So it's not about how the animal actually looks like, but it's about their experience. And we see that people who felt that the animal was less realistic for them, they increased to a smaller extent as the medium or high realism group. We didn't see any changes in heart rate at this point, and we also didn't see a difference in screen size. So it doesn't matter whether we use the iPads or the iPhone. We wanted to do a second experiment to get a more continuous design where we would have more control also about the experiences themselves. So we did a second experiment that was limited to spiders, because this was the most common group that we saw in our first study. So we included students with mild to moderate discomfort with spiders. We again did a behavioral approach task with the spiders, where we both increased the difficulty level by having spiders being far away on a table from you as opposed to being very close, but also different in the type of spider we showed them. As you can see there, spider 1 is more schematic version that induces less fear as opposed to the other spiders. For example, spider 3 is the most frightening one, or was just judged to be the most frightening one. So we differed in both the spiders and the distance between the participants and the spiders. We again asked people to report distress levels, and this time we not only looked at heart rate, but also looked at skin conductance, because this is a better measure of the sympathetic nervous system, of the arousal and activation that is going on in the body. So we looked at sweat production levels at the beginning and at the end of the experiment. Again, we saw nice results where all of our participants increased in fear throughout the task. Again, we saw the effect of experienced realism. So the low realism group, again, didn't achieve the same level of fear. And here we did see, again, there was no effect in heart rate, but skin conductance did increase. So at the beginning of the task, they were sweating less than at the highest difficulty level. What was also interesting for us is that we saw correlations between spider anxiety, which we measured with questionnaires, for example, the Fear of Spiders questionnaire, and outcomes in the experiment. So if an individual had more symptoms of an anxiety disorder, more specific phobia symptoms, they had a higher initial fear response. So at the BAT1 moment, they had higher peak fear at BAT6, and they also had a higher increase throughout the task. So although this was a healthy sample, they did suggest that increasing levels of fear for spiders only made our effects stronger. So this was very interesting, but we also wanted to look further. And the next step that we actually hope to finish already now, but due to Corona, we couldn't start our experiments yet, is to have a look at the medium. So you've got the Hololens 2, you can see it also there on the slides, which is a headset that allows you to see the real world, but also adds these virtual elements to your surroundings. So this gives you a more hands-free experience as opposed to holding a smartphone, so you can move around in space. The animal stays where you've selected it, where you've put it. And you can also do this BAT task in this space. You can see, however, that light conditions are more important here. The spider can become a bit more transparent as when there's more light in the room. So it also has its limitations. So we think it's really interesting to have a look at what the difference will be between a smartphone and this headset. So this is a study that will be coming up as soon as we can perform it, actually, with the Corona. So this is one thing that will be coming up. A second study that we're also doing is to really look at the effectiveness of augmented reality exposure therapy in a clinical sample. So previous work has suggested that virtual reality, augmented reality, and in vivo exposure are or can be equally effective for the treatment of specific phobia. But we wanted to also assess this for this specific application, for this smartphone application. And we will do this with a single case experimental design, in which we will have 10 participants who also have a baseline measurements, who will have exposure with the Phobos AR app, also following the US paradigm that Soledad also uses, followed by more measurements and also in vivo exposure, so that these patients will be treated entirely, and we can also see whether in vivo has an add-on to the augmented reality exposure therapy. So this is a study that's also coming up, and we're really looking forward to the results here. Another study, or a final study that we are also already planning, is to have professionals in the field just use this app as they would do naturally. Because it is a scalable application, it is already there. We want to see whether clinicians who just work with patients in their practice actually use it, and how they use it, what they think are the useful aspects, what are challenges, and so on, to really see how it will be used in a naturalistic context as well. So to conclude, we think that mobile AR definitely holds promise for exposure therapy. We're still hoping to get our clinical results in the near future, but first experiences are definitely positive, although care should still be adopted when we use it. You see that the role of experienced realism suggests that the effects will not be as strong in each population or in each individual, so we should definitely assess for whom this might work and for whom it might not. And we currently also, to be on the safe side, see it as an add-on to treatments and not as a standalone treatment in itself. For VR, it has been shown that it can be a treatment in itself, but for AR, we still need to adopt some care because we still need some additional research there. Finally, we think that further advances in technology can definitely improve exposure therapy as it is now. We're looking at the HoloLens to get the flexible hand-free experience, and we're very curious how this will influence our results. But we've also been in contact with the Tactility project, and we really think that tactile experiencing, combining the visual elements with also having actual feeling sensations on your hand, for example, will be very promising to see whether this can make our effects even stronger. So this is a brief overview of some of the work that we've been doing with AR. So thank you for your attention and looking forward to any questions in the chat, or feel free to contact me afterwards as well.
Thank you so much, Nele, for this great talk. I love holograms. I have to confess that.
They're pretty, right?
Well, if you have questions for me, please post them at the chat.